Growing up, I watched the NBA all the time. Whether it was the Yao Ming-led Houston Rockets, who were one of the biggest what-ifs in NBA history, the Denver Nuggets with Carmelo Anthony back when he was rocking the cornrows and was one of the baddest players in the league, or my Boston Celtics, who actually played like a team, which you don't see in the NBA anymore. Now, the NBA is a lot different today because of social media, but back in the day, the NBA never really changed much year after year except for one big moment. The Seattle Supersonics moved to Oklahoma City, and for the first time in a while, the NBA had a team move, and we still haven't seen something like that happen since then. So the young Celtics fan in me was shocked, and really interested in what the heck this Oklahoma City team was going to be called. The NBA had to play games in Oklahoma City when the New Orleans Hornets were affected by Hurricane Katrina, and the NBA was always intrigued by the possibility of having a team there, and I had no clue what they were going to call them. I was probably hoping they would call them the Celtics Down South, or Celtics 2, because, you know, nice kid. But the team that was moving to Oklahoma City had this kid named Kevin Durant, who was this long, athletic wing who could score from anywhere, but was still young and still unproven. And then 6 days before the team moved, they drafted Russell Westbrook 4th overall in the 2008 NBA draft, who led UCLA to 2 Final Fours and was this rock-solid point guard who played hard. The general manager of the team was Sam Presti. Now, Sam Presti is going to be public enemy number 1 in this video. He might have constructed one of the best big threes in NBA history, and he didn't have to piss off many fan bases by doing it. But the longer things went in Oklahoma City, the big three fell apart. But I will get back to that in a minute. Sam Presti began his work as GM of the Sonics in 2007 and immediately did 2 things. He traded Ray Allen to the Celtics and he drafted Kevin Durant. Now the Sonics only played 1 more season in Seattle before moving to Oklahoma City, and then Presti drafted Westbrook like I mentioned, and they had something to work with. They revealed their fancy new sky blue uniforms and had a logo with 3 unique color blends, which a lot of people hated for some reason, but I seem to love it. But let's be honest, this kid loved everything. I mean, look how happy he is. The 2009 season for the Thunder was, however, a big disappointment and the team's worst season. They finished with a 23-59 record, but the good news was they just hired Scott Brooks during the season to be the new head coach, and things were getting better under him. And in the 2009 draft, the Thunder took this kid out of Arizona State 3rd overall. Now, depending on how old you are, you might not remember who this is, but this is actually James Harden. I know. It's wild. You wouldn't recognize him in a suit and tie, but that's 100% him. Now, Sam Presti has gained some street credit for drafting Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden in 3 consecutive NBA drafts. All 3 of these guys would go on to win MVP in the NBA, and if this roster had stayed together, they could have gone down as one of the best big 3 ever. But they didn't. In 2010, the Thunder finished with a 50-32 record and made the playoffs but lost to the Lakers in 6 games, but they went on to win the title. In the 2011 season, the Thunder were getting much better. They finished with the 55-27 record, they beat the Nuggets and the Grizzlies in the playoffs, before losing to the Mavericks in the Western Conference Finals, and they also would go on to win the title. The 2012 Thunder, though, were the peak Thunder in the Big 3 era. The season was shortened due to the lockout, but James Harden won 6th Man of the Year, and the Thunder went on to make the playoffs. They swept the Mavericks a year after losing to them in the Western Conference Finals. Then they beat the Lakers in 5 games and beat the Spurs in 6 games to make the NBA Finals. They did, however, lose to the Heat in 5 games, but this was still a huge accomplishment for the Thunder, and it looked like they were on their way to being an extremely dominant team who would run the NBA for years to come.
Want to give Harden the max. Their position was everyone who's re-signed here has sacrificed a little something.
You gotta be kidding me. So now the Thunder were left
with a bunch of scraps!
And KD and Russ. Entering the 2013 season, the Thunder were a really good team and somehow had the best record percentage-wise in the history of the organization. In the playoffs, they somehow lost 2 games to the Rockets and James Harden, and then Russell Westbrook got injured and they lost to the Grizzlies in 5 games in the next round, and boom, season over. In 2014, KD won MVP, they drafted Khal Drogo, or Aquaman, or Steven Adams, you get to decide. Then they drafted Andre Roberson, who would be one of their best defenders, but this year the Thunder got past the Grizzlies in 7 games in the first round, then 6 games versus the Clippers, but sadly, they lost to the Spurs in 6 games. In 2015, Kevin Durant had to be shut down due to injuries, and the Thunder missed the playoffs and Scott Brooks was fired. The end. In 2016, Florida Gators head coach Billy Donovan was hired to coach the Thunder. The Thunder were great this season and got the 3rd seed in the playoffs. They beat the Mavericks and Spurs, but blew a 3-1 lead versus the Warriors. Now during the 2016 offseason, a lot happened to the Thunder. Kevin Durant was a free agent and everyone in the league wanted him, including this kid. And I give the Thunder major props because they traded for Domantas Sabonis and Victor Oladipo for Serge Ibaka, just to entice KD to stay. But KD was a snake and left. You could have made this kid happy, KD, but you failed him. Russ did go off all season, but I'm not a big fan of his playing style, so averaging a triple-double is great, but did it turn into anything? No, because they lost in the first round to the Rockets and James Harden in 5 games. So Sam Presti knew that he had to make a move. So he went out and took Paul George from the Pacers because he was on his way out. But they gave up Oladipo and Sabonis, who went on to do great things for the Pacers. They also traded for Melo, even though it was a couple years too late, and now the Thunder had a new big 2.5. Russ even signed a 5-year, $205 million contract extension, which I will get into here in a minute. The Thunder did make the playoffs, but lost to the Jazz in 6 games. Now entering last year, Paul George was a free agent, but he decided to stay in Oklahoma City, which shocked everyone. The Thunder got rid of Melo and got Dennis Schroeder, but the Thunder had another season that was really good because Paul George was in the MVP race. But once the playoffs started, the Thunder faced the Trailblazers and, well, you know what happened.
Lillard, long range 3, and it's good at the buzzer!
And once the season ended, everyone expected the Thunder to be the same old Thunder again. Have a good regular season, put up a bunch of numbers, and lose in the first round. But what we didn't realize was that Sam Presti and the Thunder wanted to get rid of Russ and Paul George and rebuild. They first wanted to trade them to the Raptors so they could team up with Kawhi, but the Raptors didn't want to give up Pascal Siakam. So then the Clippers made the move to get Paul George, and Kawhi signed with the Clippers. And after that, Russ wanted out because he felt betrayed, so Presti traded him to the Rockets for Chris Paul and a ton of draft picks. Now that we have covered all of that, let's talk about Sam Presti for a minute. You could say this man is great at finding talent because of drafting KD, Russ, and Harden. You could say he's an even better trader because of getting Sabonis and Oladipo for an aging vet, and then flipping both of them for Paul George, who even convinced to stay there. And even recently because of trading Paul George and Russ, and getting a ton of draft picks with rights to swap in most cases, and a lot of them are not lottery protected. The Thunder will have 15 draft picks over 7 drafts if all the picks convey. And even getting a young player like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander will help them in rebuilding. But Presti has put this team in cap hell, and that won't get fixed until 2022. And with the amount of money they paid for Russ and PG-13, it was tough to get out of that. It will be interesting if they move Chris Paul or Danilo Gallinari or Dennis Schroeder, but Presti has done one of the most fascinating jobs in the NBA's history. He drafted 3 Hall of Fame players and some of the best to play in the modern era. He then ran them all out because he decided to keep the worst one, and that caused more problems in the future. He has also made moves to get some really good players and even Paul George. And most importantly, he has gotten a ton of draft picks, but he better hope that the Rockets and Clippers end up struggling after a while. But the way the NBA works now and how quickly players move, there's a really good chance that that could happen. But finally, Presti has given some horrible contracts. But he might be able to rebound himself if he drafts right, and by the time 2022 rolls around, he could be good to go. So that in a nutshell is the story of what happened to the Thunder. I did my best talking about it, but there are still some more cap numbers I didn't get into, and maybe some players I didn't talk about. But anyway, thanks for watching everyone, and comment about what you think about Sam Presti and the Thunder, and if you think what they are doing will work.